Hang
Wait,
on.
shh, 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 shh. There it
Do I have to
goes.
open up
It's
YouTube?
starting right now. Hey, we are live on YouTube. What is up? We're here in 2020, about halfway through, with a very special episode. I have two guests on me with tonight, who are technicians from uh, my my anti-gravity research team. We kind of had this Falcon Space kind of .org going for a little bit, and I think I'm back to just Hover Brothers.
Live on YouTube.
Hover Brothers is pretty much a loose collection of researchers and scientists who are interested in gravity and how gravity works and how to beat gravity and anything related to anti-gravity or warp drive or advanced propulsion or whatever you want to call it. We're basically trying to defeat gravity and understand as much as possible about physics itself, unifying physics, kind of getting past the hurdles of our current limitations of our, current theories like quantum mechanics and special relativity, which the maths are just too complicated and unresolvable to mix together. And no one can quite figure out, quite how quantum mechanics works with relativity or how the quantum world of quantum field theory works to build the structure of space-time. We're working on a lot of the science behind that, as well as, I'm just trying to, I've been following up on everything I can find on gravity and all the research into gravity you know, for the past 15 years since I've been researching this, and I've been linking up with other individuals and other groups who are interested also in this search for gravity. And we're here tonight joined by Jeremiah and Wayne of Falcon Space and Hover Brothers. So welcome aboard. We got to do some work on this Hover Brothers website and put you guys. We got to get more people on the About Us page. Learn about the different teams that we're connected with and working with or alongside through the network. Not everyone in this network that we've linked up with is really. I really say, like, we're all part of the same team because we're all basically working together toward a similar goal. But
Yeah, man, you're not going to get a better team than the ARPE.
All right. So what is the ARP? This is the new team
This is the new. Yes, indeed. We've gotten rid of a lot of the politics and pretty much whittled it down to a small team of people that are actually doing experiments or have some reasonable theories to put forward to help move this progress. So we are the Association of Reactionless Propulsion Experimenters. Key focus on on experimenters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we took basically. We had a really large group going with this Falcon Space program, and there was just tons of people. Anyone who asked to be invited was getting invited, basically, and it was getting too big and kind of confused and out of control. And there were people making all kinds of claims and not bringing enough evidence to the table. So we basically took all the technicians, all the science people, all the people that were really contributing with experiments and contributing with input on the science, and really just the people really focused on the science, and we kind of took everyone from and formed another group that's sort of more streamlined towards just experiments and stuff. And I do apologize for a lot of the more technical and science-based people who follow these streams. I do want to apologize. I saw a lot of those people were kind of upset with some of the things in the last stream. There wasn't enough, evidence being presented, and not enough theories, not enough like science that people are really yearning for. That we've kind of got this, collective. The audience that I've attracted and built is sort of the people who are into this more technical side of stuff and learning
Yeah,
really the in-depth.
and
about the
specifically,
science.
it's because that's a topic that is ignored and oftentimes not put as important as it should be in other formats. It's just really hard to find any stream or any videos talking solely on the subject of engineering or building it. It's all fluff these days. And yeah,
Yes.
that's good for entertainment if you're watching it to be entertained. But if you actually want to go back to your lab and do something useful, well, there's no space for that.
Right, and there's also a lot of talk about disclosure. I mean, there's this disclosure project with Stephen Greer.
Yeah, I mean,
There's that disclosure Jesus guy, the UFO Jesus, with his post-disclosure world, talking about what's going to happen after disclosure. And the more and more of what I'm learning about disclosure is is, dude, this is like real serious education. This isn't like the government's just going to come out one day and tell the truth, and everyone's just going to accept it, and then the world's going to change. It
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
work like that.
Trump could come out, in an interview with his son, saying, "Yes, we have in fact had anti-gravity for decades, and we do have captured off-world craft." And even with that information coming out, it does absolutely nothing for anybody. Period.
Right.
Now you just had something verified. Congratulations, you're exactly where you were with your research.
Yeah, well, it's the government is saying this, and we're no closer because the government comes out with disclosures that are lies all the time. They come out with press releases that are meant and designed to be deceptive and lead us psychologically in a certain direction. So no matter what the government comes out with, even if they did have disclosure, we're still going to have to analyze it. We're still going to have to pick it apart. We're still going to have to have the people ripping it down and studying it.
Right.
You know what I
I
mean?
mean, there's very little technical detailed information that you can derive on the engineering side, even by watching the Tic Tac video. You
Right.
can say, well, it doesn't do what our crafts do, but we have no idea why it can do what it's doing. So
Right,
it still doesn't help us.
and even if all the information was disclosed, like some people are arguing it already has been disclosed and it's been leaked with this Salvatore Pais guy, that all these
Well, you could
U.S.
say the
Navy
same thing about
inventions.
like John Quincy Sinclair and those crazy patents, because before Salvador, Quincy had the flying triangle patents and the
Right.
rotary electric field flying
So
craft and the microwave
disclosure,
propulsion
so
craft.
disclosure essentially means nothing without groups like ours testing this stuff and building it for ourselves and being like, well, is this real? Because is this? We don't know if it's
Yeah,
every time the government comes out with something, whether it's leaked or disclosed, we have to like verify it.
yeah. And I'll tell you,
It
there's a
doesn't.
lot of stuff that doesn't work.
There's a lot of
It
stuff
doesn't
that
help.
doesn't work. There's a lot of stuff that's put out specifically to make foreign governments think we have these capabilities when we don't. It's just, so this. I'm shaking my head at the disclosure world and all the people talking about disclosure. This is an education process and this is a learning process.
Well, don't forget too that we are in our own little corner of this whole genre, because for the most part, what people mean when they think disclosure is they want somebody to validate or verify the idea that we're not alone in the universe. They're
Right.
not thinking really about the tech, but we're solely on that, so we kind of forget most people don't actually care about the tech.
Yeah,
They
I
would
know.
if they knew what it could do, but they
They
don't.
would. They would. Well, the thing is, I care only about the tech because I realize that it's the only thing holding us back from whatever their concept of disclosure is. Because once we have the tech to go to the stars, it's like we're gonna be
You're gonna meet
finding,
them.
and we're gonna meet them, and we're gonna be interacting with them. There's just no doubt it's gonna happen. The Drake equation. It's so statistically improbable that we're alone in the universe.
As it ever.
That if you really believe that, then you're not a real scientist. So the way that we're looking at it is, yeah, it's got to be about the technology and bridging the gap, and it's not going to be this instant disclosure thing. We're going to need to form groups. We're going to need to expand these groups and get and honestly, I want only private funding. We were discussing this issue last night about bringing some people that were interested in funding these endeavors into the groups, into our technical discussion groups, to like really, But we're like worried about, these people gaining, too much intelligence about, like the research that we're doing and the things that are going on, and B, like are they really are they in this for profit and investment to make a return on investment, or are you just in it for the science and for the adventure and to learn about it? Because that's what people like me and Jeremiah haven't made
Here-
jack shit off this. We're basically like doing this
Here's
for
the
the
Yeah.
thing.
love of it. All right.
I've
Here's the thing.
literally made absolutely no money ever, period, from this research. No one has ever given me funding specifically for this
Right.
research. No one is providing me resources specifically for this research. And the most powerful and potent thing I've ever gotten from anybody else is the collaboration that we now have in this group,
Yes.
which cannot be underrated.
I agree, and when I put out that Hover Brothers video, like back in the day, the whole announcing the Phoenix project with Ken and everything, it was the one part where we started switching to the whole thing about trying to get funding do experiments and stuff. That ruined the entire video, and that made everyone was like fake. And they threw out all the stuff about quantum entanglement and all the shit I was trying to allude to about how do we merge quantum mechanics, quantum field theory with relativity. Well, it's through entanglement. This is the entanglement is the spider web that forms the space-time metric network. And that's the key concept I was trying to get across. As soon as we started talking about the funding, it ruined the entire thing for every fucking person watching it, and it just instantly became a scam and a hoax, and it ruined it all. So I think in the future we're not going to go for, I don't want to go for funding or donations or anything like that.
Well,
because it just,
I'm not against the idea, but I think if we're going to do that, maybe we should put fundraiser in the title of the video so people know what they're clicking on, so it doesn't seem like we're selling something and then trying to trick people, or because they should be paranoid. And there are so many friggin' shows out there. You've got like all the way back to the Sundance motor, if you guys remember that free over Unity machine that was recorded on VHS promotional videos that were tossed all around and ended up on YouTube. I mean, so that there's so many people that have wild claims and they just need your money, and they do these events that are solely set up on raising money and provide nothing ever to anybody.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can
hear me.
Yeah,
we got you, Wayne.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just saying in the other chat group there. So we're not even at the as an analogy proving out Faraday's law of induction stage yet. I mean, after that came that was the precursor to the invention or development of the electric motor, the dynamo, the generator, and that's where all the commercialization and all the investment dollars came in and all that. So we're just like the way I see it, we're just in kind of in the very, very infancy stages, and just kind of proving out or discovering these laws and just putting it all together. And this is where I think we just need to have a lot of people that can, just do even one simple experiment, or put something together. Somebody who's reasonably equipped with tools or whatever can build something on their bench and see something happen and prove it out. Just to get around all that skepticism. And so
so
way too early for asking for money or funding, or I mean, it's just
I agree. It's
how
really
how many inventors in in the last few decades. It's the same old story. Some guy, lone wolf inventor, built something in his garage. It's a miracle device. He goes and gets patents, keeps it all a secret, tries to get investment dollars, and then he ends up being called a fraud in the local newspaper, and then there's lawsuits against him, and then no one can replicate his technology or device, and then he just takes his patents to the grave. End of story. Over and over again.
And in many cases, the grave comes a lot sooner than his time.
Right.
Yeah, as someone pointed out, this is like disclosure. It's like disclosure happened when Maxwell, published his theories, his treatise on electromagnetism. That was disclosure in a way, and that disclosure still hasn't resonated with people who are studying UFOs. A lot of people who study UFOs and study this stuff don't understand Maxwell's equations. They don't, get the basic field theory. There is a certain aspect of this. It's like an educational enlightenment, where we think about this enlightenment is coming to these realizations that we've been lied to and stuff. But it's realizing that there's so much knowledge out there that you could spend a lifetime just studying one thing, and you'll still find there's more to learn.
Totally. We really we need to be humble about all this.
Yes, we need to be humble about the complexity.
Just be students and study and learn and share ideas, and let the enlightenment just happen, right?
Yeah, in my opinion, the 222 items we already have in our possession, those documents are technically disclosure, and they're pretty much all public.
Yeah.
A patent is effectively disclosure in many ways of speaking.
Yes. So we have disclosure pretty much, and it's really more about educating people to bring them up to speed with the knowledge. So another thing I want to talk about on that note is documentation and the disclosure, because disclosure has pretty much already happened. It's just about educating people and waking them up and bringing them up to speed about what's and then this path for what we're trying to do with if it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong, because everything out there is just a theory and
Amen.
just a guess. Okay, that's kind of Feynman's view of science, is that everything out there is just a theory or a guess, and that we need to basically do experiments to figure out what works. Either it works or it doesn't. You know what I mean? That's where's the beef, basically, is the approach that we're taking with this team of technicians and scientists that I'm trying to put together to test this stuff and to actually elucidate it and build it and figure out what works and what doesn't. What's the disinformation and what's the real information, and trying to sort out that whole mess, because there's so much lies and disinformation out there. It's like disclosure is more about getting through all that and getting to the truth than it is about the government coming out and saying, yeah, we admit that this is the way something is, because even when they do that, we still need to verify.
Yeah, it's all about verification at this point.
Yeah.
There's just too much fluff to weed through. But
so
the good thing is
about the fluff, though. I think it's important that we build this database, and I want to put together some sort of database, and I want to get some people who are experts in up in building kind of databases and social networks.
I mean, so far, like, it's kind of been one directional on my end from just sending this all over the place. But I would love to be able to integrate it with documents that others have, and
it'd be great.
I know that everybody on our team has stuff. So
yeah, I know, and a lot of different kinds of stuff, and it'd be good to get a centralized source and a kind of a sink where we can all just dump this stuff and then just strain it out. Put it.
Yeah, and then we have multiple redundancy on all kinds of systems across the web.
Right.
So that's a very good thing.
We can all back up each other's stuff, and we can get everyone on the internet too. And then, because I'm trying to build another network when we do this kind of a dump thing, it's going to be like Disclosure Day, a D-Day, where everyone has to get on there and share and download all these files as quickly as possible. But that's going to be a mess in itself, because how are we going to prevent it from being compromised with people throwing mass amounts of disinformation and
if
viruses?
It's on a central location.
I know. I can't. It's whew. So this is a puzzle in and of itself that we need to talk about the network and the database, and talking about people. Yeah, one.
It's going to be a long time coming before any personal servers are opened up to the public, but there are other ways to go about this. Right. So, and that kind of stuff we'll definitely discuss off the air about different methods, but
I want to put it out there publicly, so that we can get more network security experts.
Well, yeah, we definitely have an intention of the thing is too, a lot of this, like I said, is public documents. It's stuff that you could download. There are different separate things all over the web, and they're available. But when you get them all in one place, things start to make sense. And God, there are a lot of similarities and parallels between these things. It's just mind blowing how many parallels you find, and they've been able, because of those things, to be grouped into major categories. 8 in total right now.
So Target Jedi says one source is a great idea, and Paul Weingart says, I can help with the networking database. Please email me at thealienscientist@gmail.com, and let's talk about it. We're gonna. I already have a couple database people and some network security guys. I'm trying to put a team together and where everyone can talk and kind of work on this together. Yeah, this needs to happen. It needs to be done. There's too many papers that disappear. There's too many articles that get wiped and disappear from the net, and we need to get them all together in one spot so that we can so that they can't censor it anymore. Yeah.
And then distribute it widely.
Very widely.
Agreed.
Very widely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
So, in terms of experiments, I mean, I think we've all been working on some interesting things. A lot has so far been negative results, as per the usual. But
I would say inconclusive, eh?
A lot of it also, with your stuff, Wayne, specifically, I've replicated Wayne's experiments here in my lab, and I found them to be also anomalous and inconclusive. There are some strange motions, and it's extremely hard to quantify whether or not we have any total asymmetrical force. We definitely have motion, but that motion may come back to a neutral point. And it's really hard to tell with the current test setup, which is going on.
Mm-hmm. So more work and refinement needs to be done.
what we really need is faster capacitors, way faster capacitors.
Yeah, well, fast capacitors and higher voltage sources.
Yes, ideally some thin planar barium titanate or any of the titanate group capacitors because of their ferroelectric properties. Then we can make a sort of like Bloomian line, delay line type of device where you get the full discharge of the capacitor with virtually no self-inductance, which would be quite ideal.
I think what we were discussing in the chat, right? I mean,
yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about in the chat.
If you cross-reference a lot of these different types of devices and things like what becomes sort of apparent, at least to me, is that in all of these devices there would be some sort of a sudden or rapid acceleration of electrons or charge carriers, and and this applies to Dr. Podklenov's gravity beam experiment and Claude Power, is that the guy?
Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, some of his experiments, which I saw the other day, which is quite remarkable.
They certainly are very visual experiments.
Yeah, so we're discussing the the interaction of these high-speed discharges or very fast discharges into or out of superconductors.
Yeah, and then we were watching another magnetic discharge propulsion device. The name who posted it I'm not going to disclose yet because he's kind of unknown yet, and I think it's best for him to keep it that way for now. But eventually, hopefully, we can make contact with this fellow and see what he has too, because those results also look promising. And yes, Serrano and others also have the same kind of thing happening, where you have these sudden transitions between barrier layers, which could be an arc that goes through the air and then suddenly hits the surface of a superconductor, imparting the electron momentum that electrons gained in their acceleration towards the opposite charge of the superconductor. And then that momentum has to go somewhere. So that's one way to explain it with the Serrano device. Different barrier layers of different dielectric K and electron drift velocities could explain how electrons could gain momentum within the device and suddenly release that momentum upon entering a high K dielectric layer. So,
or even just the different conductivities of each. Like there's layers of the semiconductors between the capacitor plates, like with different conductivity. You have different speed of charge carriers through those layers, and then as they hit those junctions too, right? I mean, it would there'd be a sudden rapid jerking of those particles and change in acceleration, which could result in the emission of those electrogravitational waves or shock waves, or which could impart momentum. And we've seen that in Dr. Podklenov's claims in his experiment, the momentum transfer.
Yeah, that just travels through pretty much everything.
And the funny thing, yeah, exactly. There's no shielding of it.
Yeah, the weird part is that it affects everything in its path, but apparently the affected object does not absorb the waveform. It continues on through, so it can punch a hole through a wall, and a big chunk of material can go shooting out the other side, and this wave still travels on to the hill, a kilometer away, and punches a hole through, or pushes some dirt into it at least. It seems to be what he was describing, and this is in the Podklenov impulse discharge arrangement, is that it seems to exert a certain amount of directional force, and then that's it. So if that directional force was like for the distance of 1.5 feet, let's say that's between his discharge electrode and the target plate, then that's the amount of maximum force that it could exert through an object, or that's basically how far every electric charge would want to travel in order to follow the carrier electric wave that was transmitted. That's kind of interesting.
That's very interesting, actually. It's not just kind of interesting, man.
But it appears, it appears that the actual length of the wave itself is somehow directly correlated to the spacing that it takes place in, or the electron momentum that is able to be gained in that space.
So real quick, Wayne and Jeremiah, what are your top three physicists or researchers that you're following right now?
It's hard to follow some because they just don't post things very frequently.
Right.
I would tell you that I'm following Podkanoff stuff because it is extremely promising. And I tell you that I'm following horror stuff, but again, there's infrequent updates and not really a lot of information happening, so there's not a lot to follow.
Right.
We're just hoping that they release something.
Right. Well, Cloud got linked up. He's from the French space agency, obviously, and he got linked up with some private investors and kind of has shut up since then. So it's interesting what goes on in this realm, and I wonder who these private investors are and what they're working on and who's working on what, and I wonder how many groups really are out there developing this in secret right now.
Probably a lot.
Because it seems like there should be like a ton. You know what I mean? and
I just can't believe it took me 20 years to even find my way into a community of other people that were also doing this. That's because when I was a little kid in middle school, I would come in with the gravity capacitor papers and talk to my friends at the lunchroom table about that, and go to my science professor and ask him if he had tin foil just to try to build this thing. And that was the best that I could get as far as a group of peers go. And later on, we ended up becoming one of the biggest Tesla coil shows in the Midwest, and went around with that thing and put on our own Teslathons. But even still, the people that were involved in that stuff weren't particularly interested in the propulsion side of things or the potential of a Tesla coil to do things other than throw sparks. So it's been a real challenge trying to find anybody who actually wants to know the science and not just see the pretty things.
It's been 30 years for me.
Wow.
Jeez.
30 years since I started. I saw Back to the Future 2. That was my inspiration.
What's a good inspiration?
I think mine was like seeing Flight of the Navigator and Bob Lazar. I think that was like, the two.
Flight of the
things.
Navigator was so good.
Little side note, I met the actor not too long ago.
That's awesome.
You know what's awesome about Flight of the Navigator is that ship was perfectly like reflective. It was like this mirror bubble, and I've always stuck with. I don't know. I've always thought that concept was really cool.
That definitely is going to be the way that eventually we'll engineer everything. It's going to be one solid piece, no rivets, no seams, no holes, no gaps.
It's weird how the door comes out of it and opens up, and then it comes back and seals in and so perfectly, and then becomes part of it.
Well, that's
again,
because it's not actually a door at all. It's just a perfect molecular bond that's broken by the ability of the machine to break or form bonds.
Wow, that'd be cool.
Yeah,
Self-assembly.
T1000 liquid metal.
Yeah, something, man. Whoever knows? It's cool stuff, but I've always known that optics and nanotechnology played a huge part in it too, because I got into Feynman as a young student, I guess, in high school, and I read his paper on "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom."
Speaking of Feynman too, by the way, there is one lecture that is the most important for us in terms of anti-gravity or gravitational control research, and it's Feynman's disk paradox. You can try to search it on YouTube, but you won't find anything. There's very little information about anybody actually testing it, trying it, or looking into it farther. There were some MIT explanations trying to deal with the paradox in some other papers, but it is extremely important. The Feynman disk paradox is the most fundamental piece of information that you can know about Feynman's lectures regarding reactionless propulsion.
I've never heard of this.
Oh man, you need to get that up on screen. You're going to have to try to find at least some image.
Thank you. Here's the thing on it, on a physics stack exchange. Here we go. So you can't have it both ways. Hold up. I want to read this. Okay. I've read the Feynman lectures on physics, and I'm wondering if this was from it. Okay, so this was right there in volume 2 of the Feynman lectures. Okay. Do you remember the paradox we described in section about a solenoid and some charges mounted on a disk? Oh, it seemed when the current turned off, the whole disk should start to turn. The puzzle was, where did the angular momentum come from? The answer is that if you have a magnetic field and some charges, there will be some angular momentum in the field. It must have been put there when the field was built up. When the field is turned off, the angular momentum is given back, so the disk in the paradox would start rotating. This mystic circulating flow of energy, which at first seems so ridiculous, is absolutely necessary. There is really a momentum flow. It is needed to maintain the conservation of angular momentum in the whole world. Oh.
So that one thing that basically is being pointed out there, going back into the database, literally like everything in the RF magnetic E cross B, V cross B field devices folder has to do with that same paradox and variations of it. The paradox is relativistic in nature. It has to do with the fact that there is a difference between the charging time of the solenoid for it to build up a magnetic field and the instantaneous release of that magnetic field upon the collapse or disconnection of the power supply. And the fact that that wave has a velocity and that there is a difference in the thickness and the intensity of the magnetic flux that is transmitted out at the velocity of light, that's where the asymmetry comes in, and that's where we get our paradox. But it's not really a paradox at all. It's covered in the Lorentz transform.
Wow.
And it is necessary.
This is interesting.
That's a deep rabbit hole for sure.
Because it's like, it's back to that whole idea you were talking about with, moving, like it's not just electrostatics and electrodynamics at that point. It's actually it's relating momentum to the puzzle, and angular momentum, which is cool.
Yeah, it gives a mechanism of action. And so there's a patent that sort of talks about this. It's US 20150022031, and it is electromagnetic propulsion system. So this doesn't talk about Feynman's paradox, I don't believe, but it does go into the equations and a general explanation, even if you don't read the math, that will show you sort of how this device can work and how you can transfer momentum using electric fields and magnetic fields.
I didn't get that fast enough to type up that patent and look it up, but can you maybe post it in the chat? So, or actually,
yeah, it's just US 2015 0022031.
02
0022031. And if you can't find it, just type in electromagnetic propulsion system after.
Boom. Let's post this in the chat. There you go, guys. Enjoy. That was awesome, man. We had I got to get Skylar back on with a team of some experts to really quiz him on the engine dynamics of that engine and really get to the bottom of his engine stuff because that engine technology is really cool, and that could change a lot of stuff and maybe be a good place for a startup for us to kind of get, we got to get some kind of startup or a company that we can come up with some kind of product or an invention that makes us some kind of money to fund our other experiments or other activities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to the great dismay of other members in the group, that product or invention probably won't have anything to do with propulsion. It probably will involve systems that we need for propulsion.
Yeah, or something that build it that we'll need, the kind of machine, something along
like,
those lines, where we get a factory that we can also build, we can also build craft and in addition.
I mean, for example, of like what that looks like in practical terms, I'm working on a Tesla coil kit, and doing so is helping me develop high frequency, high efficiency battery powered drives. I'm working on an ion powered plane, and developing the high voltage ultra lightweight multipliers for it are directly useful in studying T.T. Brown and other electrogravitics. So everything that I'm doing as far as these other research projects, it ties back in all to the central theme of gravity control. And that's the way that we're going to end up having to do it. Because if we're going to invest our time in making a product that people want, even if it's like a kit, something really cool, and maybe it's visual, it has to somehow benefit us for the time we invest in learning how to build that thing directly to our research. And it's not that hard to do since this research is such wide-ranging.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing a product to market, on the other hand, that is extremely hard to do.
Project Unity. Gravity control. I just found another project. I tried type in anti-gravity or gravity control or any of this stuff, man. You just start finding more people coming, like trying to seriously work on this idea and bring it about. It's nuts.
Every year we get like at least 30 new people that have claims out there, and they either last the year and stick around or they don't. But there's constantly new things coming. I'm sure there's a lot more than that, but those are the ones that I'm able to come across and find that aren't buried quite so deep that they're intangible.
So about photon propulsion and using light propulsion. I've been researching a lot of stuff on this recently. This is kind of what I feel like this is the epitome of really where the technology is ultimately going in the future. Because we've
let me
kind of like
ask you a question about the photon propulsion and light propulsion, because do you want to break that up into two different categories? One where you're actually talking about ultra short light wavelength propulsion, and one where you're talking about the idea of photons as electromagnetic radiation, which could be literally any wavelength. The reason I'm asking is the photon wavelength in the visible spectrum and beyond offers us the ability to directly affect the molecular structure of different materials, specifically like metamaterials, whereas the other one allows us to transfer momentum and exert forces.
Yeah, it's hard to say because on one hand I'm thinking about like these advanced light ships that trap light, get it going in a circle, break this kind of this whole idea of breaking quantum entanglement, and then also we talk about teleportation, but you can't violate the law of causality. So I was saying that what these kind of things do is they project a hologram of themselves into that place before they appear there. They kind of project themselves ahead of time so that the projection takes up that causality effect. So it's like you don't violate the laws of causality in doing this sort of jump or hyperspace leap. There's all kinds of issues when you're getting around the physics, and it's important to understand like the limitations of the physics and why you can't do certain things, and then to understand how you could get around those, where the loopholes are in the framework. So I believe that there might be some lower level like the ion drives and these quantized inertia kind of drives. That's kind of like a lower level version of this sort of thing. But no, this is it might be maybe worth breaking it into two separate levels again. To kind of like we got to kind of like break find a way to separate all these different ideas out, because there's things that aren't quite anti-gravity. They're being looped into this mix. Like ion wind propulsion or that Project Skyvault stuff, like with the electromagnetic discharges.
Tell me if you agree with I kind of broke it into these 8 categories. We got dielectric force and field shaping. We have electromechanical field systems, which is devices that require the use of a moving part or moving parts.
Right.
Hyperspace, geometry, and subtle energy devices, which is really a fringe thing. I'm not looking into that at all right now. Inertial and mass leveraging fluid devices. These are like the claims of gyroscopes that can produce propulsive forces or fluids that are used in reactionless motion.
Yep.
Then we've got ion and charged particle systems, plasma EHD and MHD apparatus, and then into your stuff with like Project Skyvault, we have RF magnetic E cross B, V cross B field devices. And then finally, to power all these devices, because maybe they're not over unity, maybe they don't produce their own energy, or they need a lot of power, then we have self-powered and radioactive power technologies. And that folder is specifically catered to only public stuff because of the nature of what's in it. So
Sweet. Yeah, so this is good that we lay out this sort of thing, so when I put this database together we can have like the different folders. A couple things from the chat I was just going and reading, and not to bring us back and jump back around, but I think this is important. The database is something we need to work towards. the idea is that we create like a way to, that people can join, but it needs a better vetting process. There needs to be a better, more profile building. We need to people need to give their real name about who they are and what, well, then we might be cutting it off to people that don't want to use their real name, that want to come in and, well, you could always use a fake name as long as your information's good. We got to have a vetting system so that not just anyone can sign on and just dump garbage there. It needs to be some way of vetting the kind of information and the materials that the people we're bringing into this database, kind of, or letting people put stuff on the database, sort of like a vetting process. That way we can kind of keep it restrictive to a certain limit, but also not,
How about top 5 experiments? Something like that.
Yeah, and the top 5 experiments, top 10 experiments, or something like that. We could go with that, and then have like these, even have some of the people from our group that are working on different experiments, highlight their work and showcase their work in those areas. Yeah, there needs to be something more done with this, but also
We want people that are You want people that are hungry.
Exactly. You've got to come motivated. Don't come in.
Figure it out. They're not.
I also want a place that people someone who has information that they want to disclose or leak or something could potentially do this through the site too, almost,
Yeah.
Not
and know that it's going to get out there without getting buried, because you can go online right now and, you can type in where to report a UFO sighting, and all these sites pop up, and there's all kinds of places to report information, but then where does it go after that? You never see it again.
Yeah.
And so if people could actually see, hey, the thing I said ended up on the show the week after, and it's really getting out there, but my name is still not disclosed, that's awesome. Then they know it's getting out there.
Yeah.
And they don't have to worry about who's, who heard what.
It coming back to them or something, because anyone could have dumped it there for all they know, So it's like someone is afraid, oh, how's this? They're going to trace this back to me and know that I'm the mole that leaked this or whatever. And not that we're encouraging people to leak information or break the law or anything.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not going to come and visit you at your house unless you invite us over. So that's pretty much how it works. Yeah. I can't afford plane tickets anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to keep it something that's secure, that we know that the government's not going to use our database to track down people and sources and either. So.
Mm-hmm. We're definitely on the right path though now. I feel like after all this time invested that we've been doing this sort of on our own, and we are getting all these ideas into the same stream in the same direction. It's just like a laminar flow. It's picking up velocity and it's reducing the resistance. We're in a pretty good place to move forward for sure.
Yes. No, we're finally getting, it's finally coming together. I think it took
all except for the money.
Yeah, well, that will come. I have a feeling that will come, because once someone realizes rockets are not the best way to get to space. They're really expensive, really just really wasteful way of getting to space. And if we can have some kind of other way that we could get to space, and whether that be reactionless propulsion technology or something else, we're going to have this is asteroid mining. This is where I want to go with this. The first industry we're going to develop after we build spaceships is asteroid mining. And we're going to go into asteroid mining, because the first person to go into asteroid mining is going to be the world's first trillionaire. And that's...
Well, we have trillionaires already, do we not?
Yeah, but they're not well reported. Yeah, right.
It'll be the world's first trillionaire, maybe the world's first multi-trillionaire.
Right, the world's first multi-trillionaire. All right, so asteroid mining... They're talking about might be a reality by 2025, and it says who wants to be a trillionaire here in engineering. Yeah, so get with asteroid mining. You'll know that's where the money's going to be at in the future. It's going to basically, it makes there's these giant chunks of rock floating around that are just loaded with gold and other precious metals. So silver, gold, platinum group metals, and you can we'll just go out there and grab these things and then bring them back to our foundry on the moon or wherever, and forge them into,
Yeah, in terms of, there's some chat here going on. Electric Tide asks, what are you going to do about the Van Allen radiation belt? The cool thing about this tech is that because it has the ability to affect the rate flow of time, as they are relativistic propulsion technologies, many of them, it is possible to develop a shield. And in fact, just in our database right now, we have several patents that specifically deal with space shields and radiation shields that are purely electromagnetic and non-mechanical in nature. So again, we haven't tested these things because we're nowhere near like even thinking about an actual craft to get inside. But when those things come, the resources have been posited out there, and we can begin testing those concepts.
Yeah, so we got shielding. We have all that. Well, we will when the time comes. So yeah, I guess we're not gonna jump the gun right away. We're baby steps, people. Baby steps.
To WDMT, not a magnetic shield per se, an electromagnetic shield that deals with radiated fields. You have to impart some kind of motion or some kind of momentum in order to get the effects going. Just a simple magnetic flux that's static will not do much of anything. Take a look at that tank shielding system, that Van de Graaff generator tank shield system that just generates a huge amount of voltage. That's a fine example of how an increasing electric field density in a given volume of space can effectively change the momentum of an incoming object flowing through it.
So let's see what Gravity Research Foundation has been up to. I haven't heard much from them in a while. Oh, 5 awards for essays on gravitation offered in 2021. We should write an essay on gravitation. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I've been thinking about putting together some presentations. There is one YouTube channel whose name I can't remember, but I bet you many people watching you right now know what it is. This guy basically looks at some of these more obscure patents and builds beautiful 3D models of them in CAD, and then sort of talks about his opinion and view of them. I love his ability to build the 3D models. The way that he explains them working is usually very, very far off. But then again, the patents don't always clearly state how they work. They're very obscure in their language, using oftentimes terms like "those who are skilled in the art will recognize." Those who are experienced in this will. Yeah, it gets weird.
So all the guys that think they know more about this than the people that we're learning from and talking about and everything, then here you go. Go write an essay on gravitation and win the $4,000 first prize, because you obviously know more than us. Oh.
Yeah, put some stomp behind your new theory.
Yeah, let's do it. If you know so much about it. Anyways, I want to talk a little bit more about just let's go back through all the history. I don't know. There's so much history on anti-gravity. We can't really cover it all. This would derail the entire stream. But you can go back. This is some of the more promising history, and I want to put together a more complete history on here too. I got my list is missing a bunch of stuff. We need to add more. What's not on here is that one theory about that Grebennikov guy.
Yeah, that's something I will still always wonder about.
Yeah, I don't know, because it seems kind of weird. They did these calculations on these insects and found that the weight of the weight of these insects is too heavy, and that their wings are too small to produce the amount of thrust that would be required to propel them. And then he figured that there was this other kind of force going on with the wings, kind of like that almost like the cellulose in these wings were acting as a metamaterial and forming a small type of anti-gravity kind of propulsion with the insect wings, or this material called chitin, and that the insect chitin was somehow creating this sort of cell and that he basically took a bunch of these insect wings and used it to make this geometric.
If you look at the wing structure under a microscope, you'd see there's tiny, I believe it was like tiny conical structures.
Yep, tiny hexagonal and other shaped, star-shaped and hexagons.
Yeah, they converge at a point, and then it might be possible that those bugs are able to slightly electrify those wings, like the little the centers of those structures.
Yeah, it's almost like a little B-2 Spirit bombers with little Biefeld-Brown effect.
That's right.
Things on the
Asymmetric
wings.
capacitors.
Right.
Asymmetric capacitors are converting electric fields.
Yeah, trying to see which one is that. Geez, I know I've added to this folder several times. I always have trouble finding it in here.
Oh,
I don't remember what it's called.
that reminds me of another article I saw. This was from July 2018.
There it is.
Spiders can fly hundreds of miles using electricity, and they talk about, the spiders use this ballooning technique. They blow a web and then they fly up in the wind. But the scientists who study this phenomenon, they realize that electricity actually, like electrostatic fields play a huge role in their ability to fly, hundreds of miles using this technique, which is really cool.
Yeah, with Grebennikov, if you want to look at gravitational structure effects and electrostatics regarding like the beetle wing stuff, if you look back to a patent from 1965 by T.T. Brown 3187206. Now, what this talks about, and this is a pretty interesting patent, it covers the use of a power supply, but also talks about the shape, geometry of the electrodes and the use of alternating fields. So if the geometry of the fields were set up using the metamaterial structure of the wing, just like the shaped dielectrics in this patent are disclosed, and alternating field were provided to them, you could effectively simulate the vibrations, or by giving the vibrations, you could simulate a alternating electric field of an incredibly strong intensity that would still have its DC electrostatic bias, fulfilling the parameters of this patent for ideal operation. So it does relate. There is something to Grebennikov's stuff, I think, related to T.T. Brown directly because of that, just like we were talking about, and that's one place you can go look and try to understand it.
That's interesting. I also just think if this effect could be used to build warp drives, why bugs? We don't see warp bugs. Why they didn't? Why warp bugs haven't evolved.
Well, we do see bugs flying with some pretty unusual capabilities, and beyond the ability of their aerodynamic propulsion.
Yeah. No.
And the spiders aren't the fine example of that, which have zero aerodynamic propulsion and seem to fly just fine.
Right.
Lofting spiders is just one various example. So obviously other insects could easily produce and do produce electrostatic fields on their wings because of the materials, and the separation between those two plates increases the voltage to an extremely high potential. That is the body, their surface of their body, and the inside of the wing. So why couldn't they loft just like spiders and fly on the electric fields coming up from the downward pour of positive ions from the ionosphere and from the particles that the sun is constantly blasting onto Earth? After all, Feynman does cover exactly this in his lectures and talks about the incredible power there. So if you were negatively charged and you don't lose that charge, you're going to be pulled upwards.
Interesting.
Which is pretty much how spiders do it. Yeah, spiders are not insects, Ultima Ratio. You're correct. I didn't mean to, mix those up, but I'm basically just saying, yes, small, lightweight, chitin-based creatures can in fact fly. Spiders are the most amazing thing ever. They're like the perfect hunting machine. They're hydraulic, no pain sensors in their appendages, just fluids to pump them, and one central processing unit where all the pumps are located and all the decisions are made. It's pretty incredible, really.
And they all come pre-programmed to know how to make epic webs.
Exactly, man. Spiders are the most machine-like thing I can think of, short of, say, maybe a dragonfly, which helicopters look exactly like a dragonfly. I would say dragonflies look like helicopters, but dragonflies came first. Just watch one of those things in slow motion. That's what I would recommend. Watch a dragonfly in slow motion, and the uncanniness of exactly what that looks like is wild.
Yeah, we don't really know what sort of electrification may happen in these bugs. Whether it's some sort of a tribal electric effect as they flap their wings, and then there's a charge difference that's developed on one side of the wing compared to the other.
Yeah, even if it wasn't electrogravitic, even if it wasn't anything special with cavitational structure effect, let's just say that the charge developed on the wings somehow added some ionic propulsion effect to their lift factor, and that gave them extra thrust. I mean, that's still a huge, significant thing to recognize that would explain their flight characteristics in a way that currently just the vortices calculations don't do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, if I I read that the Earth is negatively charged.
Yeah, rather, it's a strange phenomenon that it is negatively charged.
So that would.
And the only explanation for how this occurs is sprites that shoot out or jet out into space, and then we have these long ion channels that sort of carry out. But the thing is, if the Earth is constantly being bombarded with positively charged particles from the sun, and they have a rate flow down towards the Earth, 400,000 volts between the ionosphere and the surface, and 700 million watts of power, then my question would be, how does the Earth not lose its negative charge eventually? And I suppose the answer to that is, no matter how positively charged the Earth becomes, no matter how many positively charged particles it absorbs and that add to its mass and increase its expansion rate, it will never, ever, ever be more positive than the sun. So that's the only thing I could think of, really. But I do find it pretty fascinating that this continuous downpour of particles creates a constant electric field.
I found some and really cool considering design aspects for these kinds of things. They almost look like these fractal crystals on just a much smaller level. The kind of stuff that David,
to answer Tarka Jedi too about the database having videos. We're probably not going to do videos in the database because we want it to be something that you can stick on a flash drive, and videos would quickly turn it into a gigantic registry.
Post them on YouTube or DTube or whatever, and just post links. That's fine.
I mean, definitely feel free to download the videos if we post them up that maybe link back to these things. So if they get pulled down or banned or whatever, you still have them. But other than that, there'll be external links that probably won't last forever, and individuals will have to download them. And hopefully, enough people have the database where somebody can always get their hands on it.
So the only thing that someone mentioned that board, Victor, that picture of him on that jumping board and stuff, dude, like that's what threw me off of the whole thing. When I seen that, I was like, that's fake, dude. Like that's obviously like Photoshop or done with some sort of like thing, and that's what threw me off of the whole thing. But the insect shit in it is some interesting science when you start digging into that. That I must say. But
if it is fake, the weirdest part of his story has to be his report of developing some kind of foot cancer as a result of being bombarded with leptons. His explanation of how it works at his feet more strongly than any other part of his body.
Wow.
It's a wild claim and speculation just to say that you have a flying machine.
Here's a thought.
Interesting that he said leptons, because leptons would be electrons. Those would be electrons, muons, and taus, right?
Yeah, he theorized that the source of all the leptons was directly from the sun, and that he was only able to utilize the amount of leptons in the air at that time.
Yeah, so leptons are the electron. Yeah, so it's electron and beta decay, right? This is so a muon. A muon is also a lepton, right? And remember I talked a lot about that muon ideas for muon propulsion, muon anti-gravity. There was that whole thing about using anti-muons, for anti-gravity. That base, you know what muonium is?
I do not.
Muonium is basically, it's almost like a hydrogen atom where the proton's been replaced with a muon instead, because muons are positively charged. So you can basically, it's an exotic atom made up of an anti-muon and an electron, and it was discovered in 1960 by Vernon Hughes, and it's given the chemical symbol of mu. So there's this idea that you could basically use these muons. How did this work? So it's basically like using electrons, right? Muons work very much the same as electrons, except that they're more punched. They're like a lot heavier. So what's the weight of an electron? Versus muon. Wait, let's see. Electron versus muon.
Muons have 2 quarks, don't they?
Yeah, well, it depends on what your definition of quarks are, because I have a different model for the muons and the with that other.
Just going from standard theory.
Yeah,
To Jay Decker, can we make piezoelectric crystals that work on the natural expansion of space? Unfortunately not, because we would need a relative expansion that was different than the expansion the crystals were undergoing. And where we would get that relative field that's different than whatever the crystal is experiencing, I'm not sure. If we could create relativistic fields that were inherently different, which is what we're going for, we wouldn't need to work on the natural expansion.
Sorry, so I don't think they contain quarks because they're leptons, and leptons are like they don't contain quarks. They're kind of like the they don't the muon does not contain quarks. No. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Tarka Jedi. It's going to be a delay before any database links are put up or shared. There's probably quite a bit more that's going to be added to that thing yet. And then we, of course, because it could be internationally available, we need to make sure that everything that's in it that's going to be posted is stuff that's publicly available. But don't get it wrong; those public documents are absolutely more than you need to start doing this research and get into it.
So I have some stuff actually on the Hover Brothers site about these muonium. So if you search for muonium on the Hover Brothers theory page, all right, you'll find a couple things on antimatter, anti-gravity, and testing. You know, if antimatter has anti-gravity properties, and they use muon for that because muonium. They use muonium for that because anti-muon, it has an anti-muon, which is antimatter. So, and there's this guy Daniel Kaplan, and there was also a team at the ETH Zurich, the University of Zurich, Klaus Kirch. They did a bunch of work with. They're still doing ongoing work with muonium to test anti-gravity, antimatter anti-gravity. So yeah, that's all I had to say about that. But that would be interesting if like that, if those muons or whatever, the leptons around his feet, because he said leptons around his feet, and leptons are not they don't contain quarks. They're kind of like their own family of quarks. Morning now, where's that standard model?
I'd like to have a private chat with Nixa. Interesting stuff there.
Nixa, yeah, we should get him. We gotta get people like this to jump on me. I love when people like that jump in the chat, and because they gotta get, come on. So yeah, so these are the quarks and these are leptons.
Nixa's on the right track. I think, and high voltage discharges. I think that's one of the keys.
Right, and that's where some of these things appear in these high voltage discharges. It'd be interesting.
I've seen some weird stuff on the scales during those discharges. I can't explain it with very easily with anything.
The scale is so slow I mean, the scale samples 1 to 2 samples per second. These discharges are on the order of nanoseconds. So the fact that it even picks it up at all is, I think, impressive. But we would need the ability to basically measure forces on the order of nanoseconds or picoseconds, which is an incredibly expensive endeavor to take on. It requires specialized equipment and extremely fast transducers. And they are not cheap.
No.
But if we had that, we could pretty much understand exactly what was going on down to a time scale that would allow us to really engineer it.
Good shit. So, anything else you guys want to anything else piquing your research? One of the guys I've been following a lot is this Mike McCulloch guy in his quantizedinertia.com. His research is there. He's got 28 papers posted there. Really interesting stuff related to asymmetric capacitors and these conical capacitors and these Casimir effect drives. Interesting stuff.
I was going to say, I just wanted to. There was we were talking before about the bug wings and all that, and you just mentioned the Casimir effect. I thought, those two plates, when they're so close together, there's that force that develops once you push the plates closer together. So there's like a pressure there, a negative pressure. But with these conical structures, like these microstructures, if they're made in such a way that there might be sort of a asymmetric or net force developing.
You're dead on, Wayne. You're dead on, Wayne. So think about the Casimir effect, right? It works by the fact that certain wavelengths can't fit within the volume of space between the two plates. And the Casimir effect was interesting because it observes that the natural properties of all the space around us in the universe is filled with these waves, and just simply putting two plates with no external signals we generate produces this force. But taking the same principle, now you basically accepted that momentum in the electromagnetic waves, when they're rejected, can exert a force. So if you create electromagnetic waves of a longer wavelength, more like the capabilities that we actually have with modern day equipment, instead of these extremely short, practically Planck length waves, then we can generate a larger cavity that also responds to those larger waves, and we can put these same waves on both sides of that cavity, and some of them will in fact be rejected, and we should be able to generate the force using the CSE in the same way that the Casimir effect works. And actually in that document database, there are again several patents talking about solid-state Casimir propulsion devices and energy generators.
Wow. What about even just, looking at molecular structures? Some molecular structures have these trigonal, I forget the names, but they're pyramid shapes, and there's different shapes of these molecules. So applying an electric field across a crystal would, could foreseeably create these structures, and then applying what you're saying there with the
I hear what you're saying. You're basically saying that these atomic structures could simulate the same types of effects because of the way that they interact with the electric fields.
Microstructures, to create this. That's a whole other. That's a whole other ball game.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's certainly if it works on a large scale and we can do it with like physical objects that we could put together with our hands. Then there's no reason to think that we can't continue to shrink it down to the atomic scale and actually develop metamaterials themselves. I mean, the first transistor was a rock with a wire pressed against it, and now look at what we have. So,
indeed,
I think that's more of an advanced study, though.
Yeah, so this is where I believe it's going. Yeah, this is what I've been saying, is that we're got these like experiments with these rotating superconductors, or these conical capacitors, or these Mach effect drives, or these Woodward effect thrusters, or these quantized inertia experiments and stuff. Yeah, I think it's about scaling it down and building it on the nano level. Oh, hey. People can hear your vape going too, the whistling of your.
Oh, is it loud?
Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
I can hear it too. That's the first time I noticed it. I wasn't noticing.
Well,
it
I'll
before,
mute myself then. I'll mute myself when I'm doing that.
Then the conical capacitors. My idea is that if you could build this stuff on the micro level, on the nano level, we could potentially increase the effect by 100 to 1,000,000 fold, depending on how many of these things you could fit.
Yeah, think about the field density of a structure like that, and just how much power you could squeeze into a small space.
Right, that's exactly what it is. It's you're squeezing all that power into a smaller space and increasing the effect massively. That's where I think it's going in the future. That's where my goal is to get to.
There's an interesting metamaterial that has to do with actually generating these types of fields like we might need in a CSE structure, micro Brown structure. I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's a bunch of radio antennas that are printed onto this layer by lithography, like a processor, and they are oriented little circles, square, like you'd find in a security theft system where the beepers would go off, these little kind of square antennas. Anyways, they're basically those, and they get fed from these onboard transistors that are built into the board. What they do is they can either convert straight DC into photon wavelength radio emissions. So we do now have technology to generate actual photons directly via radio waves instead of through junctions like LEDs do it. Or if they don't use onboard transistors, they can directly absorb and orient photons to generate electric power like a solar cell for a very specific wavelength, which is pretty darn neat. But if you were to take those things in the transmission mode and stick tiny cavitation structures in front of them, effectively you would have created the full system. Now all you need to do is add a DC bias source and you've got it. But I can't print those. I don't have any ability to do lithography of any kind. But hey, there is a possibility in the future that we could do that. Or somebody could do it.
People are talking about oxyhydrogen. Really cool stuff. The dry cells. I know a guy who was making Brown's gas, very dangerous stuff. But this is a little more safe. You know, it's I like the oxyhydrogen idea a lot better, just because it's doesn't have that factor of like storing hydrogen gas or Brown's gas. You know, a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen, combustible mixture.
Well, the HHO is the perfectly burnable hydrogen and oxygen mixture. That's what comes out of that thing, and it is extremely dangerous. But Brown's gas specifically differs from HHO, wherein the hydrogens are in chains instead of just being individuated into H2. So it has this strange property of containing much, much more energy per volume space than HHO gas.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
I used to do that like electrolyzers back in 2008.
Yeah, that's right around the same time I was making them. Had a lot of fun. It cut through anything.
I had one put in a car, and a mechanic did some emissions testing on it, and he was just amazed at how, wow, there's no emissions coming out of here, and there's no nitrous oxide and nitrous oxide.
Huh.
He was impressed by that. But he got some guy came along from the BC Safety Authority and said, you can't put those in cars. That's explosive. So he got that was the end of that.
It hasn't stopped. I mean, there are still places all over the U.S. that will install them for you.
Huh. I did one actually to my friend in Colorado. We did one to Jeff Peckman's car. He bought one and wanted us to install it for him, so we did that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've heard some of the crazy claims. I've never personally installed it in one of my vehicles because, quite frankly, I've never owned a vehicle that was like robust enough to handle better compression or better combustion. But that's where Dan would come in and damn with that engine, dude. 100 to 1 compression ratio. Yes, I'm very excited about that project getting out in the public.
No, Bill. Oh yeah. So people are talking about Bob Lazar's HHO car, and that wasn't an HHO car. He actually used the lithium hydride tanks to store hydrogen and power.
I didn't even know Bob Lazar built an HHO car.
Oh, it was a hydrogen car, and he didn't build it. He just bought the parts for it and kind of put it together. And he said that he said that he produced the lithium hydride for his tanks. He said he produced his own lithium hydride in a particle accelerator, which
that's quite a bold claim for
bullshit.
Some guy.
Because his particle accelerator is too small. It would have taken forever to produce that much lithium hydride. It's way better, way cheaper just to buy it.
Unless he claims he had a LINAC. If he had one of those, then he could have done it in as little as 6 feet.
A LINAC?
A microwave beam linear accelerator.
Yeah, but
so those are used in CT machines, and they are pretty short, and they get electrons going to a pretty darn close to speed of light velocity.
Yeah, but the power that it would cost to run.
Oh, geez, yeah, it's like 28 kilowatts just to start one up.
So the amount of power that you need and the cost of that power would be way more than just buying a bunch of lithium hydride.
Yeah, he'd be pretty much using all of what was available to him off the pole. And his neighbor's lights
and
would dim
more,
if he ran it.
and
so.
more. He'd have to have a flywheel, you know, like basically charging up during the day to like run the power
Well,
on it.
I mean, not really, but I've pulled with the Tesla coil stuff. I pulled as much as 100,000 watts off of the.
We'll see. It's quite a bold claim, and I've had numerous physics people point that out when I've shown that. So.
But yeah, well, I agree that it's possible to actually get the kind of power he would require. I absolutely don't think for a second that he had the ability to assemble a machine capable of conducting that kind of power.
But hydrogen is very ideal for a fuel, except for the fact that it's explosive, and you know, I think we'd still
Yeah, but
have,
you know what else is
hydrogen.
explosive? All hydrocarbons, including gasoline. That shit's pretty explosive too if you get it in a vaporous form.
If it weren't for that Hindenburg being one of the first disasters caught on film, because that video, you know, of that blimp blowing up kind of ruined, you know, hydrogen for the world.
Yeah, I think people forget just how many successful flights the Hindenburg had before that little incident.
Crazy.
And it wasn't the only one flying around. There were many that were decommissioned with no incident ever having been recorded. But it's a shame. One scowl on the public face will always leave a bad taste in people's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. The age of airships, man. And Buck Rogers flew an airship. He didn't fly a rocket.
I don't know about y'all, but I love airships. I don't personally want to own one because I don't want to die. But you know, I do love the idea of seeing airships flying around. I just don't like the idea of the fact that they have a huge surface area that wind can easily push against, which is kind of unideal.
Here's a concept. Speaking of airships, have you ever heard of what's it called? Well, imagine if you had a balloon and you had ordinary atmospheric air in it, and then you had a needle discharging terminal.
So I did that. I did exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I had a video. I have a video on my channel about the electric magic wand, and I've gone through many iterations of it since to develop it into a very powerful device. But what I did is just I have an ionizer electrode that sticks on it, and the one that I tested it with is a 130,000 volt DC positive. So it would produce positive ions. I just take a grocery bag, I fling it up in the air with one side so that it kind of inflates, and then I just stick that thing up in the center, and as soon as I hit the button, 130,000 volts generates enough ions, and the bag inflates itself all the way. It does inflate just like an air balloon, like you're thinking it would, and it is pushed away from the ion source.
Mm-hmm.
However, the amount of force that it generates in terms of pushing away is barely able to keep itself aloft, and the ion source is about 10,000 times heavier than it needs to be. So though it's possible, could you get enough ionic density? I mean, theoretically, it should be insulated pretty well. So, yes, you could inflate the balloon, but you would need another same charged pole to push against, or an oppositely charged pole to pull yourself into. And the question is, where do you get that? Perhaps just the atmospheric downward positive ionic drift could provide more than enough force if you had negative ions filling the inside of your very well dielectric insulated balloon. And maybe that would actually work. I mean, it's possible. There's certainly enough current there coming down. And you get like twice the lift during the daytime than you would at night. But hey, I don't believe anybody's ever tried it.
That's not true. Actually, you know the balloon boy, right?
Well, yeah, I know about that story. That thing wasn't ion powered, though.
He had a thing in it. He was trying to power it with ion. He was trying to basically set up Bifeldt-Brown inside that Mylar balloon to like test Bifeldt-Brown on balloons. That's part of some of the work.
That's all doing. Stuff. I just read that. I just read the stuff about Balloon Boy. Ironically, because synchronicity is a bitch. Like a day and a half ago, and I was looking through the article and I watched the original video. I don't know why it even came up. But I didn't know it had anything to do with this guy's research, or that he was some kind of like engineer or scientist.
I knew him. You know that, right?
You knew him?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So he lived in Fort Collins when I lived there for about from April to like October in 2009. I left like a couple weeks after this whole thing happened. I left right around Halloween. I remember I came back and I had Halloween here. but I hadn't talked to him for like 2 or 3 months before I saw that on TV. And I remember my dad called me. He's like, "Hey, this guy's on TV, and it sounds like this guy you know." And I went out. I was like,
Oh
"Oh
boy.
God, it's him!" I was like, "Oh my God, he's like he was working on these balloons and like trying to test, Biefeld-Brown effect and yeah, the asymmetric capacitors and." He had this whole like rig inside the balloon. That was the thing on the bottom. It wasn't big enough to hold the payload of a child. It was big enough. All it held was this electronic kind of apparatus that he had
Is there
charging the
any way
thing.
that you could maybe like contact this guy and find out what he had inside there? Because I would love to know.
I could probably have all the information saved.
Oh, you actually have like what he had inside? He had some kind of an arrangement,
I have to
and you
dig
know what
through
that was?
I have to dig through that stuff. Yeah. I don't know who. I might even have emails saying who he got to build it for him, who built the electronic part of it, because he wasn't very good with electronics and stuff. I built a lot of electronics for him to test a lot of other stuff, but all I worked on with him was all this free energy stuff. Because he was
Apparently MIT wasn't either. That's why that plane weighed 5.5 pounds.
yeah,
Sorry,
so
go
he
on.
was doing all this free energy stuff. So I was building motor controllers and stuff like that with him, for these ideas that he had for these like these brushless motors, these different types of motor controllers, which I'm sorry, we had nothing on Tesla and their motor controllers. They got us beat, engineering wise, hands down. We were like, but anyways, we did a lot of free energy experiments, and I was telling him why they wouldn't work, and trying to like explain to him the like second law of thermodynamics, and like where that we have to find like a source and sync off of that somehow, and and all this and I watched him piss through a lot of money, and then we got to and then like I stopped talking to him like a week or probably like 2 months before this happened, and then I saw it on TV, and then I was and then and actually Richard Heaney is the one that flew to Finland in 2004 and got the interview with Eugene Podkletnov.
Huh.
You didn't know this? Hold up, let me find this. So UFOs, it's in here. So right. So get this, right? Let me find this picture. So here's a picture of me with Richard Heaney, the balloon boy, Dad, right on his back porch. There's a prototype. It's a prototype of one of these things he built, where he had he was testing the Biefeld-Brown effect off on this. This was like the conical piece on the top, and then it had a flat piece on the bottom, and they were separated, and there was like dielectric in between, and he charged the whole top of it, and this was like one of the test models of this thing. And then that's not the actual Mylar balloon. That thing's built out of polyisocyanide panels that are coated with that.
Coated with what? It's built out of what?
Polyisocyanide foam panels.
What is polyisocyanide? I've never heard of that material.
Polyisocyanate.
Cyanide. Wow. What are the properties of the material that cause him to choose such a obscure thing?
No, it's not obscure. Polyisocyanate.
What is it used for, generally speaking?
Because isocyanide. This is it's foam. Common use is so let me find pictures of it. Right. So.
Well, if it's like really lightweight and it appears he's got some kind of metallic coating, that could be what I need for the ion plane too.
This is it right here. PIR board or isocyanate board. Yeah, this is it right here. This is this stuff. This stuff. It's used for insulation, like for home insulation. It's like insulation paneling. It's the reflective, IR reflective panel coated. It's like Mylar or this metal material. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is. But
I guess I need to brush up on my synthetic foam material names. Then I should have already known that right offhand. But apparently I have much research to do.
I don't know. Yeah, there's different types of foam. They're formed different ways, like polystyrene and polyisocyanate.
See, I knew about polystyrene. I've just never heard of polyisocyanate.
That's what the different types, and then it compares it to that great stuff. Yeah, I need to brush up on this because it's good material science to know all these different types of foam and and how they work. But polyisocyanate's good because it's pretty. It doesn't catch fire and burn, you know, like the same. It's really good. It's good for used for insulation because it doesn't just like go up like a tinderbox like the nightclub station fire. And the nightclub, with the station nightclub fire in Providence, that was all that insulation, that soundproofing insulation. That was a different type of foam. I think that was
Oh,
what was the type of foam they use for to make soundproofing insulation. It's a different type of foam, but it goes up like really fast, and that's what caused that place to burn down in like 1.5 minutes with like 600 people inside, and caused one of the most
wow.
deadliest nightclub fires of recent history. Anyway, not of all time. I think the most deadliest one was in Boston at the Coco Cabana, or what was the there's two of them that happened in Boston that were really, really bad. But
Let's just
anyways,
hope that by 2100 we can all be insulated with aerogel or something even better.
back to the balloon incident. And Richard went to he's the guy that went to Finland. Let me find this. So here's a picture of him, dude, with Eugene Podkletnov. That's him with Eugene Podkletnov. He flew there in 2004 and got that interview, and he's the one that gave that to me when I posted it, like back in 2009. I think I posted it in 2009, a couple months after this went down, because he was saving all this for, and all his experiments and all this stuff. He wanted to do a TV show, and he wanted to put this whole thing together on anti-gravity, dude. And he wanted to basically create a reality TV show like Mythbusters, but just for anti-gravity and free energy. And we were gonna like basically get like funding through that to do this. And
I remember hearing about the show. I just didn't know the name.
yeah, so and the whole, we had a pilot that was put together for the show, and it was, I forget what it was called, but basically,
I
like,
believe I've seen that pilot. It was like pretty intense,
yeah, I don't know if
very technical.
we had a couple different ideas for it, but it was gonna be like he was like the guy without the education, and I was gonna get a bunch of like physicists on to like basically like he was gonna come up with these crazy ideas and build this shit, and then it wasn't gonna work, and then we were gonna like come with the team of scientists to explain to him why it didn't work, and figure it all out for him at the end of every show. And that was kind of like the theme that I was hoping for, because he's like this friggin' he's this nutcase and like complete like fucking I don't know, I don't know how to describe a Richard Heaney, but like he'd be this perfect candidate for this fucking, yeah man, we're gonna make anti-gravity and this is how we're gonna do it. And then it's like, this is why it doesn't work, and he's like, like he's just like this perfect character, like he could play it so well. But I don't know when I saw this whole thing go down, and then I see like Internet Historian did this whole thing on this, right? Internet Historian, which is funny because it shows you what about a little bit about history if you want to really get into events. But Internet Historian is this guy, and he's got 2 million subscribers. Where's his balloon boy video, right? This is funny that we're talking about this. The Untold Story of Balloon Boy. So from 3 years ago, it's got 5 million views, dude. Right, if I made a Balloon Boy video,
I will have to watch this after the video for sure.
I know I don't know why we're even getting into this and talking about this. Just because it has some relation to science. Because it's funny that the Podkletnov interview came from Richard Heaney, and that he hasn't done that Podkletnov hasn't done an interview in 15 years, right? 16 years it's been since he's done an interview. He hasn't done any follow-up interviews to that one. And the guy who
just that one series of videos that he released a little more recently was it.
And that's it. But the guy who interviewed him was the Balloon Boy's dad, like Richard Heaney. That's just funny history. That it's not like here it is in this untold story, but yet there's more going on here, and there's so much wrong in this story, because he went and talked to Richard and like, and was like, oh well, it's about this thing, and that there was this show, and what was Falcon Heaney talking about when because Wolf Blitzer interviewed, right? So this is the thing, Wolf Blitzer interview Falcon Heaney. So the 6-year-old kid admits we did it for the show, and this is what blew the whole case wide open for everybody,
He's asking Falcon, did you hear us calling your name at any time? You did?
You did?
Because the original story was that he didn't hear them calling his name, and he was sleeping up in the attic, and he was supposed to say that, but then like,
Come out.
You guys said that we did this for the show.
Earlier in the
Oh,
show,
cool.
Ryan,
right?
Yeah,
So,
you should link both of those in the chat. So like, just throw them open in a new window and get them ready for after this.
Yeah, so anyone following this in the live chat can go check that out, and they can go check out this internet historian video, right? Which is rather interesting, because they missed a big piece of it. Because so this interview, internet historian interviewed him and says, oh well, the show that he was talking about, he was just confused, and that he didn't really talk about that, and that it was, so they think we cracked the case. That's what he claims, that they cracked the case. Okay, it's just funny, because I've been waiting for somebody to really crack the case who like this in this band.
That's pretty cool.
I influenced those little motherfuckers, because I went over there and played guitar for them. They had like this shitty guitar like set up with an electric thing that they probably like got for Christmas and like never played with, and I tuned it up and I plugged it in, and I ripped out all these Metallica solos and all this stuff for them, and they were just like, oh man, we want to, and then I dare guarantee I influenced these kids to become musicians. So I know these kids, and when I seen that, I was just like, dude, for the show. Richard, really?
No,
The
man.
show? And then I watch Internet Historian, they talk about the show. So what's up with the show? So anyways, it was 2009, April, pilot season. So I wish you could find this. I don't think you could even find this, to find all the episodes that were pitched to like all the pilots that were pitched in 2009. In April 2009, April is pilot season. It's like every April, all the new shows are pitched to the networks, and they decide which other shows get the hatchet and get canceled, and then find out which new shows are coming on. And we were competing in 2009. I remember we put all this together, and we were competing with freaking what's it called? We were competing with Two Coreys, was one of the shows, right? That became a show in 2009. And how would I remember this? Because I don't watch TV and know this stuff, but I remember it because we were competing with all these other shows. And Two Coreys is one of the ones about Corey Feldman and Corey, the other Corey, I forget, but his best friend there. That show got won over the Richard Heaney show. So that was the show that he had put together, and we were basically this reality TV show for like studying anti-gravity and free energy technology. And that's what I'm pretty sure the show that he was talking about, we did it for the show. When he said we did it for the show, like this was a publicity stunt. Everyone knows it was a publicity stunt. They got charged with it being a publicity stunt. They pled guilty in court to it as being a publicity stunt. Just fucking admit that it was a publicity stunt, but tell them why. The real story is not being told. It's like he doesn't want to admit to it being a publicity stunt. He's still fucking like trying to hold on to this. Like, no, it wasn't. My 6-year-old son made a mistake when he told Wolf Blitzer on public television that we did it for the show. That's the cat. And everyone just jumped on that, and then the prosecutors. The prosecutor was corrupt. In Larimer County, big whoop. They all are. The entire justice system's corrupt. All across America. Let's get get with the times, people. But this the untold story is that Richard Heaney was working on anti-gravity. He interviewed Eugene Podkletnov, and he was on to like a lot of this shit and doing the same kind of research back then. And that was one of the few people out there that I that I found at the time that was into this, and they ruined this man's public image and his reputation, and part because of that, and probably I don't know why he's still like not talking about the real shit. He's sitting on a fucking treasure trove of all kinds of interviews, because Polyklitnov wasn't the
Man,
only one he interviewed.
I wonder if there's any way that you could still get some of those from him if he's got them, or some are saved.
They're all
That would
sitting
be
on tapes in his basement that are going to go bad in another 5-10 years. You know what I mean?
Dude, somebody's got to at least try to get that stuff from him, and you're in the perfect position to do it.
I tried to reach out to him already.
Oh, man.
After I watched this, I emailed him, and I tried to contact him. I got his email, and I tried to reach out to him, but he never wrote back to me. So I said, "Fuck him. If he's not gonna write back to me, I'm gonna."
I wonder if somebody said
The
something
truth
to him.
needs to be told. The truth needs to be told about this, because information out to the mainstream and the public, and it just doesn't happen. It's always just corrupted, or some stupid version of it, because they just focused on how his balloon couldn't lift a kid. Well, if it had if it had friggin' other propulsion system on board, then it could lift a kid. But they didn't talk about any of that shit. They just had these physics professors on to say, oh, well, the amount of helium in the balloon couldn't have lifted the child, and this guy's an idiot, and I don't know what the hell he was building, and what he was, what he's talking about, and stuff. But yeah, he was kind of an idiot, and he was kind of, not really a good engineer who really knew everything about what he, could put everything on paper together. Not everyone is. He was good at building
No,
stuff.
that's for sure. Definitely not everyone is.
Tell you what, Richard
as we found out last week.
Richard, I worked with him in construction. He had his general contractor's license out in Colorado. We did a lot of construction together when I worked out there. That's how I made my part of how I made my.
Man, why do so many interesting research have to go into obscurity for one reason or the other? It's like, what is wrong with us?
It's just weird. Anyways, that's the real history for anyone that wants to. That's the real Balloon Boy untold story for anyone that wants to, hit up Internet Historian and tell him to fucking interview me and get the real story, do the follow up. So.
And maybe he'll take you up on that.
Right? For real.
Hey,
you already talked to Richard.
That's a pretty good, so far we're into like an hour and a little over an hour and a half on the show. It's not too bad. I think we've covered quite a bit of information. I think Wayne's gone silent for the night.
Yeah, he fell asleep like about a half hour to an hour ago. I want to talk, anything we could cap on for anti-gravity, because this is kind of like, I wanted to do like an instant expert's guide to anti-gravity and bring people up to speed. And we kind of did a lot of tangent and talked about a lot of other, stupid things like Bob Lazar's hydrogen car and the Balloon Boy. But,
yeah, well, I in terms of about the propulsion tech and the physics principles that apply, right now my main focus is going to be on the radiated EM stuff. There are many ways to approach it, from Al Zafan with reorienting the Lamar precession of electron valences to high energy pulse magnetic fields. But right now what I really want to focus on is the EM conversion, that whole Lorentz transform where we can transfer momentum, because I think that's one of the most tangible ways that is universally understood, and that's what I'm developing right now. Wayne has a really interesting coil design to produce a monopole magnetic field, or a pseudo monopole.
Right. Well, we need tech that's readily engineerable, that's demonstratable.
Well, it is. That's what I love about it, because it's a really simple design and it can be easily made. I'm going to build it in just a few days here. I just got to run over to storage and grab the wire.
I'm back on here.
Oh, hey,
guys.
welcome back.
Oh,
I had to step away for a few minutes, but
that's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to be signing off pretty soon here, but yeah.
So that's why I like Mike McCulloch's stuff, and he's got quite a number of guys like us out there, these other research groups, even people at universities, real serious about this. A lot of people writing who already took the time off with the COVID-19 lockdown to write up some grants to actually get research money to actually build devices and study this effect further. So I think this could be very well be the start of inertial drives. And understanding how to build quantized inertial drive mechanisms. And so that's what I'm hoping for. If 2020 could be the start of that, maybe some good could actually come out of this whole pandemic and this whole COVID-19 disaster and everything that's happened. So
Yeah, I mean, it's the experimentation and research is accelerating. We always have a hiatuses between like jumping from one experiment to the next when we get negative results enough times, and we're finally just putting things on the shelf for a little while until we get either a better understanding or we just completely write the idea off because we were able to replicate it faithfully and it just didn't work. But we're always jumping around, and right now I'm kind of in between experiments with the ion craft, and Wayne is still continuously working on other ideas, and so is Nam. So we've got other people that are actively pursuing that as well, which is nice.
Well, our discussion tonight's really got me intrigued there about the multiple layers of dielectric and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, very much so. Man, did we get into some stuff on the chat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm seeing some cross-referencing all these different devices have come across over the years, like going back to the Bill Beattie's gravity capacitor, like way back in the year. What was that website, like from 2000 or
2000,
something?
yeah.
Yeah, that dialogue there, and that's
From
always
the
been a
days
bit
of
of a
KiwiNet and all those good old sites.
yeah. And then Serrano's patented device from 1999, and with the overlapping plates.
It's hard to believe it was that far back, and like nothing has really been done with it since then.
Yeah,
and
it's
we've
crazy.
been watching it this whole time.
How much did that guy spend on a world patent? And I don't know.
I mean, it had to have been many thousands of dollars at least.
His wife must have been pretty upset with him.
I don't know if he was married at that time. It's a good point.
Whatever.
It's quite a time ago. And geez, I don't know, man. I always wonder about Serrano because it seems so promising and it incorporates so many of the right things. And he has a working theory included in the patent, which does mostly make sense. I mean, it doesn't include all the mechanisms that explained verbally that you would need, but allegedly it's covered in the equations. So I don't know. I would love to test Serrano stuff, but having all these various well-assembled dielectrics has been a constant bit of trouble, and there's only so much that you can do with mixing various materials and powders into epoxy and then making your own capacitor plates. There comes a point where you need a press and you need a oven, and properly making ceramics is a necessity, not an option. And I think that's with some of that stuff, that's where we're at. Is we need better capability of producing materials that actually have the properties required by these patents.
Yeah. So there's the thing that I've mulled over in my mind about the difference between, like using the right kind of materials in dielectrics and that whole thing. I've thought a lot about the nuclear spins and all that, and how that might have some effect. But then there's also just the pure field type effects. Like if you look at the Hutchinson effect, where he just had, a couple of Tesla coils and a Van de Graaff generator, and he was able to levitate bowling balls and this kind of crazy stuff. And
yeah, what a wild setup.
So that's just like a pure field effect, right? In space, where you've got these overlapping.
You build these scalar potentials
waves
by photon interaction.
So there's that, and then like altering a region of space by these fields, and then there's the effects of certain materials within, say, just an electric field. As anyone is well aware of the bifield Brown effect and that kind of approach. So,
yeah, and if Feynman is correct in the momentum being stored in the field, which I'm absolutely sure he is, then there's quite a lot of potential in that direction specifically, and it's engineerable with what we have.
You should explain a little bit more about that. I don't know if you want to get into it here, but yeah, I'm not.
It might take a little too long at this point in the show.
Yeah.
But I would like to. We could probably do a whole show just on that and the various technologies that relate to it, because there's so much there.
Yeah.
But save it for another night.
Yeah,
let's a few hours.
Hey, let's name all the. Let's take just the last bit to name all the scientists that you've researched, or any scientist that has any kind of anti-gravity or other research worth studying that you'd like to mention. I'll start with Bernard Haisch, who led me to Todd Desiato. He's written papers with Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff. Also Alfonso Rueda, a name that appears on a lot of this. You can this is how I find a lot of the other scientists and physicists with a lot of these other ideas too, is by looking at papers that they've co-written and co-authored together. Todd Desiato was a member of our group. He's not been very active. He's got a lot of other stuff going on, but he's got some really interesting theories and other stuff. Also, Jack Sarfati is another guy that I kind of follow because he's interesting to watch and make some interesting posts from time to time. And he's doing a lot of stuff with the stardrive.org. And feel free to butt in and interrupt me with any.
No, to be honest with you, I don't really have a list of names that I follow because I really don't follow the names. What I do is jump around all over the place and follow the experiments. Yeah. And if I can't find some like tangible evidence of experiments by a certain name, I really don't care much about what they're doing.
Right.
So what I have is a whole list of like experiments and documents that have all kinds of names, hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't begin to list you off who was the most important in each of them.
Oh yeah.
I just know the data.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with
like if you were to look at, say, everything that Tom Bearden has written, and then everything, let's say, Dr. Paul LaViolette has written. I mean, it's very different, different theoretical approaches.
So on that note, this is a good channel for experimentation, just pure experimentation. The Old Scientist was a good one. Where else? Any other channels? Join the Technicians, obviously. So, definitely.
Yeah, I'll actually be starting a new channel specifically regarding this in a very short order here, because I want to separate some of those more public projects with this kind of fringe research, because it is a totally different audience. But I would like to very much start a channel that includes that and perhaps even the ion plane. So we'll see. But that's something that's going to be happening pretty soon here, because I'm getting video footage that I need to compile together and narrate and explain what's going on to people. And it just takes time. Right now I'm kind of jumping the gun on doing more experiments and less videotaping so that I can just get to a point where I have something more impressive to show. Because a little motion is something, but a lot of motion, that's what people want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. So let's.
Yeah, I focus on just trying to get the experiments as is on video. I don't spend much time on the editing on my channel, which is a small channel. Fail forward research. That's where I put my experiments that I think are somewhat worth sharing. Even stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah, as we've been talking about, never underestimate the value of a negative result, because at least you know what doesn't work, and you can stop wasting your time on it.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I like it. Who else have I been researching? I've been doing a lot of research into this polariton stuff, basically negative mass. The idea of physics creating negative mass, and the way they do it is with these condensate, these condensed matter states of polaritons, which is like trapped light.
Is there any way to work with polaritons without the requirement of supercooled fluids?
So this guy right here, this is a recent paper from, I think this was Claude Pover. No, this isn't Claude Pover. This is from China, I think. Coherent propulsion with negative mass fields in a photonic lattice. You might be able to find this was from optics letters, 2019. But they build a photonic lattice, get them all these photons entangled, and they built a way of creating negative mass field propulsion using a wall of photons, using a wall of entangled light. And this is exactly what some of the physics and stuff that I've been talking about. This is where I'm saying the research has really been at with squeezed light. You go back to that, look up 30 years of squeezed light, and these squeezed quantum states. The idea of that, basically, it's a whole theory of gravitation as well, because the idea is that gravity is caused by information blocking by horizons. That's what Mike McCulloch's theory is.
Yeah, could you explain that in layman's terms? Because I've heard you talk about that too, and I've had sort of a contradictory idea in my head about certain things that you're explaining. So I would love to hear it in a little bit of a simpler term, if you could.
So the idea is that that gravity is actually mediated by photons. That photons essentially are gravitons. They carry the gravitational information, and that when a photon is absorbed or radiated or reflected by a mass, it loses some of the spatial information is lost over time, and that causes a little bit of the space between these objects to gradually like shrink or disappear through this photonic interaction. That basically like all things are moving charges, and moving charges constantly create photons or electromagnetic fields, which keep this sort of which is sort of this entangled communication of the network or the web or matrix will have you, and that masses only generate gravity or create mass by their position in the web or the matrix, which over times and iterations slowly make sections of the matrix disappear according to an object's internal mass. It's mass energy, or it's horizon. It's horizon.
Well,
basically
that
how
was
much.
an excellent explanation, and all of that made sense. But then we get the two terms that I think still I don't understand how they fit into this, and that is, what's the horizon specifically, and how does a polariton fit into this EM theory?
So the idea is that we have masses as like these objects in space which are blocking information and reflecting photons, creating gravitons, and creating gravity through their interaction with matter. So the idea is that when you start squeezing light and creating these processes around your craft, so you create this coherent beam of squeezed states, and what that does is it essentially there's a couple different theories, but one.
Okay, I understand why I was confused now.
Yeah. So one is that that these states are essentially creating negative mass. Well, negative mass is just a weird concept. The other idea is that basically it's cohering this matter to a single wavelength, so that these photons interacting with it basically make it invisible to gravity, to gravitons, to photons, so that photons no longer interact with it, so that the information isn't no longer blocked by the object. So if
let me explain this in layman's terms if I'm understanding it correctly. So basically what you're saying is that the name for this squeezed volumetric space, you could be calling this negative mass, because negative mass is effectively when anything enters it that has some mass. Instead of decelerating, it accelerates, which would make sense if it's suddenly passing a much larger volume of space in the same amount of time. It would seem to be, to us on the outside frame of reference, gaining energy.
So the idea is that gravity comes from this mix-up of information. That when you have mass and just this random arrangement, that as photons come and interact with it, it creates gravitation through this loss of information. It's like a blocking of information, so it's a loss of information. It's when information is lost because it's blocked. So that the correcting function of the way everything this way that this sort of simulation self-regulates itself, or the error correcting code happens, is that it creates gravity is like this error correction in the code basically, and that it's through a blocking of information, so that if you entangle all that information and cohere it and make that blocking invisible, so that the information can pass through and it no longer blocks. The idea is that that's kind of what negative mass is, because it's the opposite of mass. It's basically it's a passing of information. It's instantaneous, superconducting of information rather than this blockage of information. That's my interpretation of it. It's just right
Yeah,
now.
it just leaves me with the question of, wouldn't a mass that completely blocks or ignores information just be a neutral mass, whereas a mass that not only blocks information but radiates it out would in fact be a negative mass because it would be it would be providing more energy out to its environment that it could possibly interact with. I guess maybe I'm not understanding that completely, but hey, I'll read up on it and get myself more educated.
I need to read up on my explanation. I also woke up in the middle of the night and decided to do a stream, and it's now like 5 in the morning, so I'm not up
Yeah,
on it.
same
And
story.
I have some notes on this too that I really need to read up on and get like precise on this. But this is where I think the ultimate it's in nanotechnology and understanding light and how photons in the universe with itself through photon, and this arguably really are they detecting gravitational waves or real gravity. That's arguable. I don't know. We're at an interesting point in science. It's only going to get more interesting from here. But I agree with your guys' approach. It's just really looking at experiments and things we can test. And
Like, I've got a limited capacity to process all of this information, and there's 1,001 theories out there that you could spend a lifetime trying to comprehend. But at the end of the day, which is going to get you there? And I have to go with Feynman on this one.
yeah.
It's like I understand my limits as a human being, and I understand that there's only so many things I can pick up, and it takes time to do them all. So if there's anything I have to focus on, what can I actually use? Kind of got to draw your line somewhere and be humble enough to say, I can't do it all, and I can't do even a fraction of it, but I can do some things.
But the more I'm finding about...
like they say, if you can't explain it to a third grader, you don't really understand it.
I've always loved that.
Yes. Well, some of this stuff is so hard to explain it, like it gets super complicated because you're building upon all kinds of knowledge that, you're expecting this third grader to already have. So it's like, you should already know what a quark is, and you should already know, what, this is and what,
Well, right. Well, anyway, basically what it's saying is can you explain the principles either using an analogy or basically including all the information in your explanation that they would need to get a visual grasp? Because I think a lot of this comes down to, can you visualize it or can you comprehend it in your mind in some way? And so much of this stuff has nothing to do, no visual counterpart. It's mostly mathematical. It has to do with subatomic structures that we see the properties of, but quite frankly can't even view directly. And it gets rather complicated to try to explain using layman's terms. But I think that the principles can be whittled down into some kind of analogy that would make sense. And the water analogy for electricity worked for a really, really long time and still does for somebody that's just starting out. And there are
that's a good one.
So it's necessary to have these analogies. They're wrong if you look at them verbatim, but they'll get you at least into the idea where you can begin to conceptualize. Yeah, right. It's just like Heaviside equations. Yeah, they're terrible when it comes down to this kind of engineering, but if you're an engineer and you just want to build a working circuit that involves magnetics or electric fields, then they're fantastic. Well, I'd say that was that's probably about it for me. I think it was a pretty good show. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm gonna go make some breakfast and catch up on sleep. And let's. I'm gonna read up on this for the next couple of days and really when I do the next stream, I'm gonna have a much better explanation of this squeezed light stuff. And
I'll be looking forward to that for sure.
And this polariton condensates and all that crap that I've been talking about that Mark doesn't understand at all. He's like,
you've been told where to put your polaritons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna keep working on polaritons, and when Mark and Amy figure out anti-gravity and have disclosure ready in a package, then to show us with a device and everything, then we'll have something to look at, and I'll be patiently but I won't be holding my breath for it.
No,
But I really
I'll be honest. I hate the term polaritons because I think it just adds layers of complexity to something that could be explained without that term at all. But I guess if you're trying to, as most science does, come up with words that can explain a large number of things with one term, that pretty much does it. I still hate it. I have my opinions on things, but I agree with the principles completely.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. We'll figure this out one way or the other, and if we all agreed on everything, we would never get anywhere. So that's why I like we all. That's why I like everyone here wants to.
Yes, we can agree without throwing a tantrum at each other within this group because the adults are talking today.
Yeah, or if I don't believe you, it's not. Oh yeah, you're not seeing it, you're not understanding, and
I hate that, man. When if you don't believe somebody and they accuse you of not understanding their perspective, quite frankly, they fail to explain it in a way that you can understand, and it's always their job to explain it to you, just like it's your job if you're trying to convince somebody of your theory to explain it to them.
Yeah,
and it's not their fault if they don't get it.
It should be the goal of getting ourselves more educated and becoming smarter ourselves, not convincing other people how smart we are.
Yeah, we all start out as students, but there's a point at which we've acquired enough knowledge and experience, even if all we've learned is 10,001 things that don't work. We need to go from students to teachers at some point so that we can at least convey this knowledge. And I don't think that there's really any other way to avoid having to learn these concepts that well.
The only way to become a teacher is to remain a student.
Yes. Well, you have to remain a student continuously, absolutely. But we also have to take some effort to take our conceptual ideas that exist inside of our heads and put them into words conveyed in a language that other human beings can understand. And that part can be rather difficult.
Yeah. That's why
I like your explanations of stuff, Wayne. Your explanations are elegant and straightforward.
Well,
I'm really impressed by that.
I'm used to thinking in a mechanical way because that's my background is some mechanical engineering. So I that's the kind of my approach is. The terminology can get really convoluted. I mean, if you're talking about like gravity waves, longitudinal waves, electrogravitic waves, I don't even know what to call it. There's all these different terms.
Space energy tensors, space-time curl. And,
tonight I've heard scalar waves. You heard that one?
Yeah, scalar waves are pretty much what Bjorn goes on about and what Hutchinson uses.
So at the end of the day, it's got to be all the same wave, the same shock wave or whatever.
Exactly. What really are we looking at with all these different terms? They're just describing different angles of interaction or different modes of interaction between the same thing.
Yep.
An electric field that has a direction with some amount of diffraction going on where there's a stronger spot and a weaker spot. That's like really everything. That's at the core of what's all going on here. And you can call that electric field a photon. If that electric field has particularly wrapped properties, you can call it a polariton. But it's all the same stuff.
Right. And it's time variant, and then we can do stuff with it based on time variations and different frequencies and modes, and it gets quite complex real fast when you start adding multi-mode signals and everything that's going on in this universe. It's quite a bit. But it's based on very simple principles. Yeah, it's just oscillations between 0 and 1 at different frequencies. It's all frequency and vibration.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we should probably head it up for the night. We definitely need to do another one of these again, and we've got to get more people on our team. So some of the people in the chat I've seen tonight I would like to speak with. I don't know how open they are or willing to do that or what format we should choose, but it will be nice to connect with some of the people in the chat.
Send you an email, Jeremy?
Yeah, you can come talk offline or on air. If there's different people that participating in different levels at all different levels on this team. So join up, link up, and share your knowledge and ideas with us. We'd love to learn from you.